Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about the trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories simply aren't true without checking facts first. Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Welcome back. Well, that was interesting. It's hard to believe that that video compilation is 7 years old. Welcome back to Freedom Factor. I have kind of an interesting one for you all today because I wanted to discuss something. This came out, this kind of came up like a while ago, and it's been one of those instances that has been pushed forward recently because, and really I've kind of wanted to talk about this because of the there's this whole debate recently surrounding, so there was a couple, it's been like a week and a half now, long time friend and guest, frequent guest to Joe Rogan, Dave Smith, was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and there was a debate with Douglas Murray. I would highly, highly, highly recommend, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's good. It's brutal. So full disclosure, I'm a big fan of Dave Smith, being kind of the same, Mises libertarian bent as he is. And so we share a lot of similar views. And full disclosure, I did not used to be very, I guess you could say, good. That's not the word I would use. I had kind of a different opinion for a long time on the whole Israel-Gaza thing. And, Dave has inspired me, along with many others. For one, Daryl Cooper is another one that has inspired. And I'll get into that in a moment, but at least Daryl Cooper, the controversy there. But Dave has kind of led me to a different perspective and gleaned more information and kind of inspired me to look into it a little bit further and kind of change my views. I used to be kind of, not unapologetically, but like I used to be kind of pro-Israel. I'm not anti-Israel now. I'm just anti what the Israeli government is doing, and having looked more into it, and I could do an entire episode on my views on the Israel-Palestine conflict. It really is. Dave has kind of led me into kind of a different thinking that I think I'm more in line with what his opinion is on it, because I've listened. That's the thing. This is how things should be. You should be allowed to change your view, change your opinion, change your thoughts on any topic if you go into it honestly, candidly, and openly. And I did that with Israel. At first I was like, God, here Dave goes again on Israel. I really wish, it's one of the big issues, one of the big issues I really disagreed with him on. When it comes to economics, we are almost completely perfectly aligned. When it comes to border policy, we are in line. When it comes to freedom and liberty, free speech, how you should treat others, all of that. Religious, not so much. I mean, he believes in God, but I consider myself a pretty strong Christian. And I'm pretty locked into my faith. However, the one major key point I used to disagree with Dave on was Israel. And I used to get, not mad, but I used to get kind of like, he's talking about Israel again. And I can't come to grips with agreeing with him. But then I've actually paid attention and listened and looked at what has been going on over the last, I would say, maybe 20 years. But it's really been going on a lot longer. I mean, it's been going on. I can't recommend it enough. I'm still working my way through it, but Daryl Cooper's Martyr Made podcast, where he does Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem, is phenomenal work. He is not claiming to be the expert. He's not, and I'll get into this portion in a minute. But Daryl's not claiming to be the expert. He just does a lot of reading and research, and he cites his work. I mean, that's the other problem. That nowadays everybody is so. This is where, it kind of infuriates me. This is where college has kind of screwed everybody, because now just a basic discussion on the internet with somebody, be it Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, wherever, you make an argument. Like, for instance, here's one that actually happened today. I was on a libertarian Facebook page, and I said something. They made a thing about the Fed, and I said, well, we just need to get rid of the Fed. We just need to abolish it. And the Fed, that whole Ron Paulian chant, end the Fed. We need to end the Fed. And this guy comes back and he goes, well, the Fed's a good thing. I don't know. And I was like, no, the Fed is awful. The Fed is bad. And he's like trying to argue with me on this. And I'm kind of like, dude, what the hell? And he said, so I've yet to see a single source on the Fed, or I have yet to see, what did he say? He said, I haven't heard a convincing argument against the Fed. And I was like, dude, first of all, you need to put your Keynes book away, because Keynesian economic theory is awful. And I'm not going to get into economics, but he's like, well, I haven't seen a good argument, and I've been reading on the topic. And I'm like, it sounds to me like you're not reading the right criticism of it. And so I recommended looking into the works of Thomas DiLorenzo, who he's been on Tom Woods and does a really good, he does way better job of explaining the detriment of the Fed than I ever could. And so, I said, look into Thomas DiLorenzo. He's a former economics professor. He's the president of the Mises Institute. He's written extensively on this topic. He's very, very good at explaining this stuff, far better than I ever could. And he basically, in the most abbreviated terms, I said that, that the Fed has a monopolistic control over the supply of money and oppressive regulation over every type of financial transaction in America. I mean, we were warned of a central bank by the founders of this country. And the way that they really aren't under the purview of the federal government. We, the people, don't control the Fed. It's not like we can just write to our Fed representative and say, hey, interest rates are getting kind of high. Can we kind of bring that down a little bit? Can we kind of stop flooding our economy with all this money that you guys keep printing? So yeah, the Fed is bad. And the fact that, and so many conversations nowadays are like, well, I need to see a source on that. You need to cite your works. Dude, I'm borrowing something. I think it was Rob Bernstein on Part of the Problem that said this. I don't I don't bookmark all the things that I read and have like this running list of works cited I can just throw at people whenever I'm in an argument. Oh, gosh, hold on, let me pull up my bookmarks. What? You think that the Second Amendment only applies to muskets? Hang on, let me find my, Federalist Papers. Let me find my works of Thomas Jefferson. Let me find my James Madison letters. Dude, no, that's not how it works. And, like, if you ever watch a debate, they're not going in and citing their works. They're not citing all these references. Sometimes they do. In this book, this person said this, or, in this book, Hans Hermann Hoppe, cites this, or Murray Rothbard said this in this book. Nobody does that. That's not how normal conversations work. And that's where we kind of got screwed by college, the whole college idea, the college mantra of you have to have a damn work cited in order to argue something, because clearly you can't derive your opinion from multiple sources over multiple years of looking into a topic and saying, hey, this is how I came to my conclusion over a long and storied history of reading about this topic. I've done extensive research on fundamental and, well, I guess I've done extensive research on Islam. I had to for the military before we deployed to Afghanistan. And so I kind of know a little bit about something there, I kind of know a little bit about the history of Afghanistan, especially post-World War II Afghanistan. Post-World War II to modern contemporary Afghanistan. So I kind of know the history behind, what we did in the 80s, and then what we didn't do in the 90s. And, Charlie Wilson famously said, what we did was great and wonderful, and then we fucked up the end game. And that's true. That's been a lot of our problems. But I digress. So, this whole idea of, citing your works, a lot of the citations people are using are terrible. I'll get into a discussion with people about a topic, and they'll come back at me with this insane bullshit from Mother Jones, or it's I don't understand how people can say that, hey, I read this article on MSNBC or New York Times or anything. I mean, really anything. And that's the thing. People will say, hey, they'll cite a really bad source. And that kind of, yeah, that starts kind of things in the wrong direction. And so really you can't trust every source that you see in everything. But so anyway, back to the Douglas Murray thing. I think if you haven't watched it, there's a lot of commentary following it that's kind of hilarious, because I think, and I agree with Dave, I think Douglas Murray lost. Did Dave win? In my opinion, yes, Dave won. Dave presented his arguments very well, and Douglas Murray committed to a lot of logical fallacies, which really destroyed him. He fell into that folly of logical fallacies. And just to kind of show that here, let me see if I can...
Have you been to the crossing points?
No.
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been?
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now? I've never been to... Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them?
You can't time travel, but you can.
Right.
But you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point?
No,
okay.
I find that
lots of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you.
Yeah, but
so
if
I don't
you're
know
going to spend a year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
All right. I just think this is a non-argument.
You don't
but
think?
Okay. No, I think it's a non-argument.
But if you're an expert...
Well, you have to go and touch the ground to
No,
be
I
able to
think
talk
you have
about
to
it?
see... I think it's a good idea to see stuff, particularly if you
okay.
spend a career talking about something. Yes. I have a journalistic rule of trying never to talk about a country even in passing unless I've at least been there.
Okay.
It's
But that's
sort of
not
normal. It's a normal thing to do. You're talking about... Hang on, you're talking about crossing points. And not only have you never been to a crossing point in either Egypt or in Israel, but you've never even been to the region.
Okay. Again, I
How
think this is
can
a
you-
non-argument.
Hang
I
on,
don't understand.
No, it's not a non-argument.
Yeah, it is.
It's not a non-argument if you're insisting that you're an expert of some kind, or not claiming you're an expert, but still talking about it, about the provisions going into Gaza or not, if you've never seen any of this going on.
So you're not
That's
allowed to
amazing
speak
to
about
me.
things that you've read about. You can only speak about things that you've seen with your own eyes.
You can talk about what you want,
Uh-huh.
as you're proving. But that is a different matter from spending an awfully long amount of time talking about an issue in a region you haven't even had the courtesy to visit. Well,
All right, enough of that. I used to, full disclosure, I used to be a big fan of Douglas Murray, but this really tarnished him. And that was just a clip I pulled off of somewhere. It's a Jewish Uncensored page. They're like, this is why you should never argue with Douglas Murray. No, that's exactly why you should argue with Douglas Murray, because he's saying that Dave can't have an opinion on the Israel conflict if he's never been. And that's an absurdist take. This is why corporate media and the old guard is dying. And that's, if you couldn't tell, that's the title of this episode. And really, it brings up a good point. Here's the deal. The idea that you have to have been somewhere in order to have an opinion on it is laughable. At best. At worst, it's ridiculous. Let me just kind of... I've never been to Iran. But I certainly have an opinion that the way that they run their country is pretty bad. I've never been to Saudi Arabia. But the way that they classify women as second-class citizens is wrong. I've never been to North Korea, but I can tell you that Kim Jong-un and all them are not... that every leader of Korea since the 1950s has been bad for that country. I've never been to Ukraine, but I have opinions on the Ukrainian This is a... pardon my language, this is a fucking stupid argument. It's really, really, really bad. And this is why, the whole corporate media is losing. I mean, like that first clip that I showed at the very beginning. That is definitely, absolutely 100% what's going on. So here is... Let's see if I can cue this up. All right, so here is the other one. Oh, hang on. Here's the other one that...
I'm an expert on this, and I have views. I'm a comedian.
I've never claimed to be an expert on anything.
This is the problem, Joe. If somebody
Wait a minute,
says...
you have to claim to be an expert on something to have an opinion on something?
You don't.
But you're not
Thing.
even talking about specifically on what he just said. What's the solution? To not talk about it?
No, it's to have more experts around.
During all of
Fire
COVID,
away.
I will put my track record against any of the expert class on COVID. So should I have just shut up? Should I have shut up by opposing lockdowns and opposing vaccine mandates and talking
that
about
was
the
the
lab leak
argument at the
theory?
time. You realize
That's
that,
the
right?
entire argument that you're making. Let the experts handle
I'm
this.
not. Isn't it weird to be simultaneously saying I'm not an expert on a conflict and talking about it everywhere?
Do you talk about these things?
Some of them, yeah.
Are you an expert?
I am on some, yes.
On some,
But you talk about something that you're not an expert on.
What should you do if those subjects get breached?
So Dave kind of pushes back, and even Joe kind of had to jump in and was like, what the hell are you talking about? Not being able to speak on something unless you're an expert. This appeal to authority is out of control. And this is why the corporate media is terrible at this. The experts have proven time and time again that this is completely stupid and foolish. the experts get things wrong. I remember COVID. I'm sure we all remember COVID. The experts said 14 days to slow the spread, 15 days to slow the spread. Then that 15 days to slow the spread turned into hundreds of days. The lockdowns went longer than 2 weeks. They were telling us if we lock down for 2 weeks, we'll be fine. Then they told us wear a mask. Then they told us social distance. Then they told us, and it kept going and going and going and going. And the experts conveniently got everything wrong. Repeatedly. And the fact is, trust in so-called experts is probably now lower than it's ever been. Ever. The experts are not the end-all be-all of opinion, of what is factual, what is truth. And the crazy part about everything is in 2025, almost everybody over the age of 17 is literally walking around with a device that can access the entirety of human knowledge. Now, has that made us smarter? No. But it has the potential to make you more informed. Granted, there's a lot of false information out there. I mean, just look at pretty much anything coming from the left or coming from the extreme right. I mean, like a perfect example of the false information out there is the Russia collusion story. Trump didn't collude with Russia. In fact, if anything, Hillary Clinton has had more ties to Russia than Donald Trump. And like the lab leak, they tried to suppress the fact that it came from a lab in China. I could run down an entire list of times that they got it wrong, that they've said this, but so it's and the fact that these people say you can't do your own research. And the scary part is Konstantin Kisin said this recently about, he calls it Podcastistan, criticizing new media. You have shows like, and this is where things really went off the rails, was in this last election cycle in 2024. Because it showed, you have these people that go out there and you can't really debate on a topic anymore. On corporate media. You really can't. I mean, they'll have these panels and they'll have, like if you watch like MSNBC or CNN or Fox News and you watch these so-called news shows where they'll have like a panel of people, they get sound bites. They don't get a full discussion. People like Joe Rogan, I would even say, kind of off, on different kind of line would be like someone like Sean Ryan, his podcast. He pulls on people, some pretty amazing people. I mean, he was one of the first ones to have Trump on, but granted that was kind of a softball throwing thing. It was really what kind of put the nail that started nailing these nails in the coffin of corporate media was Joe Rogan, when he had Donald Trump on his program, and it was a conversation. It wasn't this scripted, pre-approved bullshit interview like what you see with most presidents and candidates, where they go on some, we've got an exclusive CBS News interview with candidate Trump. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's a dog and pony show. When new media is actually having the 2-3 hour long form conversation where you really can get into a topic. You can really delve into it. I'm planning on doing an episode soon on it. The Austin Metcalf murder. If you haven't heard, there was a murder that occurred in I can't remember the town, but in Texas there was a track meet. A black kid killed a white kid after being asked to move. It was terrible. But if you look at the media slant, like, you get the story from these news agencies that just talk about it, but then you really dig deeper into it by watching these more long form conversations about it. You know, the hour-long podcast. I know a lot of people probably won't like him or don't like him, but like Matt Walsh, he does a really kind of interesting take on it. He'll do 20-minute monologue on a topic at the start of his show. And that's where you kind of delve in deeper into the topic. You can discuss it at length instead of just these, 1 to 2 minute highlights that end up getting, just becoming clips and sound bites that the news organizations can do. And you don't get full context from corporate media. And the journalists, and I use the term loosely, journalists, they do a lot of things in bad faith. They have a lot of bias. They don't really explain things. You don't get full context, and they chop. That's the other thing that drives me nuts about this, like, corporate media, is they chop. The Very Fine People is a perfect example. When Donald Trump said there are very fine people on both sides, he wasn't talking about the protests in Charleston. He was talking about the broader issue, which was statues. The debate over these Civil War era statues. A lot of people were complaining that the Civil War statues were offensive because they were quote unquote glorifying these Southern Confederates, these Confederate leaders. And the other side was saying, no, it's about preserving our history. This is our history. If we don't study our history, we're doomed to repeat it, as that old line goes. And so a lot of people, both sides of the argument had valid points. I mean, I'm on the side of we shouldn't just tear down statues, but on the other hand, I don't understand. And I guess I'm not a Southerner, so I guess I don't fully understand the South pride thing. But, like, people waving Confederate flags, why are you celebrating the losers? I don't understand that. And, I understand people have pride in where they come from, pride in the South, and the South shall rise again. But no, I don't. I don't think so. I don't think, because the Civil War. Granted, one of the issues was about slavery, but it's like that. They took it out of context, and they said, Trump was saying that these neo-Nazis were, these white supremacists were good people, very fine people, when he wasn't even talking about them. And he even said it. I condemn white supremacy, absolutely. And anybody with half a brain would recognize that yes, white supremacy should be condemned. However, we shouldn't just throw them in the gulag just because they have a difference of opinion. People are free to have their own opinion. That's what freedom of speech is for, is to protect the unpopular speech, even if you disagree with it. Now, that being said, when these piece of garbage white supremacists go out and they call for violence, that's when you go beyond the freedom of speech and you get into, calls for violence and inciting violence and legitimate threats. Those are not protected under free speech. However, for them to say we don't like X people, be it, Jewish people or black people or Hispanic people or what have you, them saying they don't like them, they're free to say whatever stupid crap they want to say. Let the idiots call themselves out. That way you know that they're morons. That way you know that they have stupid things to say and that they're stupid people. Let them. It's like goes back to Sun Tzu. Like don't interrupt the enemy while they're failing. So when these people are saying stupid things, why are you trying to shut them up? Let them talk. Let the whole world see how stupid their opinion really is. And then people can judge them. Then you can say, yeah, white supremacists are morons. But it's just like this whole censorship thing and this whole getting, things out of context. And everything is just absurd. So, yeah, the corporate media is straight up dying and new media is taking over. And I am all here for it. 100%. Here's another clip with this one. How do I preface this one? Because this one's kind of it's a little long. I might pause it, but let me. How do I preface this? It's Dave Rubin, and this is where I got the Konstantin Kisin quote. So here, I'll just play it and we'll talk about it.
Guys, I do want to do one other thing, which we just added before we started recording with you guys, because our friend Konstantin Kisin from the Trigonometry podcast, he put up on Substack an article about something that's been kind of brewing online. And I'm just going to read you one line of it, and I want your take. Podcastistan is a place where people scold the mainstream media for failing to live up to their standards while having none of their own. And this was to the backdrop of a Douglas Murray, Dave Smith debate, largely about Israel on Rogan's podcast. And I've been thinking a lot about this because people are putting aside even the specifics of the debate.
Okay, I have to hold on. I have to pause this and kind of comment. First of all, Konstantin Kisin's I can't stand him. That quote about like all that is just wrong. Second of all, Dave kind of gets this wrong when he was saying that the debate between Dave Smith and Douglas Murray was mostly about Israel, because a lot of it wasn't. They wanted it to be, but Douglas Murray kind of refused to engage with his appeal to authority bullcrap and all the fallacies. Like, that's the big problem nowadays with, and it's not just corporate media, it's all over. But really, it's the logical fallacy of engaging with these. It's engaging with all these logical fallacies. Namely, one of the biggest ones is appeal to authority. Who are you to talk about this? Where's your expertise? You're not an expert. You can't discuss this. You're not an expert. Where's your expertise? What's your education? What's your degree in? What's your study? You know, it's like, first of all, I'm a history buff, and he'll say it and I'll get into it. I'll comment on it in a second. But I'm a history buff. I don't have a degree in history, but I read a lot about history. I watch a lot of historical, I wouldn't say documentaries, but yeah, documentaries and programs, and I read about a lot of history stuff. So I like to think I'm pretty well read. I don't have a degree in history, but somehow I know the history of, like, I did an entire study on Osama bin Laden when I was in intel school in the Army. I did an entire thing on Osama bin Laden. I had to present it. I did a thing on Ayman al-Zawahiri, who was bin Laden at the time, bin Laden's number 2. I did a whole thing where I went over, where these guys came from, what led them to believe what they believe. And, like, especially with, like, bin Laden. He was a rich Saudi who his family runs one of the biggest construction firms in Saudi Arabia that's connected with the royal family. And he went to Afghanistan to fight with the Mujahideen against the Soviets in the 1980s. The same Mujahideen that the United States CIA backed. And he, like, one of the big reasons that he got so upset with the West was he told the Saudi royal family after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait that he and his Mujahideen, who beat the mighty Soviet Empire, which, I mean, kind of, they beat the Soviets because we helped them. It's the same with how were the Soviets able to beat the Germans in World War II after Operation Barbarossa and Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. They were able to beat them because we helped them. Well, little tidbit on history, because I figure I should go off on this tangent, and I will. Tidbit of history, the Ford Motor Company helped the Soviets build up their infrastructure to be able to build tanks. Like, they could not build tanks at the same, I guess you could say, same rate as we could. They didn't have the technological know-how to industrialize their mechanized infrastructure to build tanks until we helped them. And we gave them a lot of equipment and stuff to fight. And so that really is one of the main reasons that the Soviet Union was able to defeat the Germans. That, and also the Soviet Union literally threw millions of bodies at them. I mean, if you look at the statistics between which side lost more, the West or the Soviets lost a ton more than the Americans. But anyway, so, like, you know, they do this, and, you know, they say you're not an expert on this, or you don't have a degree in this, or you don't have formal training and education on this, therefore you can't talk about it. That is just false. So here, let's continue.
And you guys are welcome to talk about whatever you want, obviously. As we watch mainstream collapse and the gatekeeping that you were talking about earlier, James, and most people watching this, I think, agree that gatekeeping has been terrible, especially COVID, I think, blew apart so many doors for people that now they're questioning everything. And you've got people thinking that Winston Churchill was the bad guy in World War II and somehow Hitler was good. And just like the
Okay, that's the part right there. He's talking about Daryl Cooper, and to provide context, and I know Dave Smith has talked about this. Well, for one, okay, so let me go through what Daryl Cooper actually said, because it was on the Tucker Carlson show back in September of 2024. I watched it. It was a great interview. I think Daryl Cooper is very well read. He makes some really compelling arguments, and you really have to have the full context to understand. So, first off, Daryl Cooper was telling Jocko Willink, who's a good friend of his, and they do podcasting together. And I do like Jocko. He's awesome. For those who don't know, Jocko Willink is a former SEAL commander. He was at the Battle of Ramadi. He's a very accomplished veteran podcaster. He does a lot of really good work, and he's friends with Daryl Cooper. So Daryl Cooper on Tucker Carlson said sometimes he likes to engage in hyperbole to kind of poke the bear with Jocko. If you don't know, Jocko is a huge guy. I mean, Daryl Cooper's pretty fit. He's if you see pictures of him, and I could pull one up later, but like, Daryl Cooper is a pretty fit guy. Jocko is a beast. Jocko wakes up at like the butt crack of dawn every day to go work out. He's very disciplined in this. I wish I had his level of discipline. It can be trained. So he's friends with Jocko, and Jocko's an Anglo, and so he kind of like pokes the bear, and he said, kind of more in terms of hyperbole, not so, like kind of an exaggeration, not so much in earnest. Said that, you know, I think that Winston Churchill is the real villain of World War II. That's not to say he committed the most atrocities. No, obviously Hitler is really, really bad and murdered people. And then he goes on to say, after the invasion of Poland, when Britain and France declared war on Nazi Germany, Hitler said, excuse me, let's end all this, and wrote several he kind of like, you know, broached peace, tried to broker peace, and said, that's it, we're Poland and we're done, and we want peace, like let's not continue this. Whether that was earnest or not, I don't know. I don't think so, because Hitler had a really bad beef with the French. I think it was inevitable he was going to go after France. But regardless, Churchill basically said, no, we're not calling a truce. We're going to war with you. And that kind of led to World War II. Where I think Daryl Cooper got it a little bit wrong is the fact that you really think that Hitler is just going to let France just kind of... No. Hitler had, from the beginning, there's a reason when Germany invaded France, there's a reason that Hitler basically took the French leadership to the same place where the Treaty of Versailles was signed and made them sign a new treaty basically capitulating to Germany, like their formal surrender. So I don't fully agree with the estimation that Churchill was solely responsible for World War II actually becoming a world war. However, he didn't help the situation, if that makes any sense. So, taking that out of context, nobody, Daryl Cooper especially, nobody is saying Hitler's the good guy. Nobody is defending Hitler. Nobody. It was him. It was another instance of taking things out of context, which is my biggest complaint, especially with the corporate media, but also with other people in the, I guess you could say, quote unquote, new media space. So, all right, let's continue.
Of things that we've upended, we are finding ourselves in a weird place where everyone's just going off to their corner to find truth. I do the best I can on this show to tell people what I think. I'm going to have some blind spots and make mistakes every now and again. But as we whirl further into Podcastistan, as Constantine is talking about, is this, like, in some sense, the most dangerous thing that a modern society can be in, where we're just going to all define truth for ourselves? And in some ways, we have to blame the previous gatekeepers because they did not do a good enough job gatekeeping correctly. If I'm framing this correctly, James, feel free to clean that up if you don't agree with the premise.
Okay, hold on. I got to pause it again because this is just absurd. The idea that is this dangerous, it's kind of teetering on that whole idea of did you do your own research? Did you do your own research? You did your own research, didn't you? Oh, bless your heart, you did your own research. You didn't talk to the experts I agree with. That's what they're really saying. You didn't draw your conclusions from the experts who agree with me. That's the problem right there. The gatekeeping by the corporate media, where they say our expert knows everything, and a perfect example is, again, back to COVID. Robert Malone, he was silenced because he didn't agree with the mainstream narrative. And so, if you don't agree with the mainstream narrative, you're shut down. And that's what he's talking about. The gatekeeping. This is not dangerous. It's not your own truth. There's only one truth. But I digress. It's the whole people saying, I did my own research, and people laughing at them for this. I've done my own research. And guess what? I have found a lot of information that is not being shared. Like, there's a whole lot of stuff out there that is not covered by the mainstream. I don't even want to say mainstream, by the corporate media. There's a lot of, Dave even talks about, I probably have blind spots. Yeah, you do. Everybody has blind spots, and the fact that you can recognize that is actually admirable. But so, let's continue.
No, you're not wrong. So the social constructivism I talked about earlier is relevant, but also what you're witnessing is postmodernism. What he's actually putting his finger on is called the postmodern condition. So now we have, I guess, the alt media, which largely codes right. Podcastistan is a great name for it, because if you don't pay your right dues to it, then they'll kick you out. That it has gone postmodern. This is the postmodern condition, and everything that went along with postmodernism on the left that sucked is going to come here that also sucks. But the social constructivist viewpoint, which, by the way, critical constructivism is the formal academic name for what we call woke. The social constructivist viewpoint is that there's a they out there, the critical constructivist, because you got to be critical theory of it. There's a they out there who have gatekept the institutions so that their knowledges are considered valid and nobody else's outside knowledges are considered valid. Therefore, outsider knowledge that challenges the existing establishment is considered more valid. And so that's actually also what he's touching on. So this is why these people qualify under a brand name like woke right, because most of them identify on the right. They push so-called right-wing values, and they've adopted a left-wing epistemology. I said that in long form with Winston on his podcast when we were at ARC together and talked about this same issue. So they value outsider knowledge that supports a prevailing anti-establishment narrative, aka a critical theory. And so this is what we're actually seeing in, and of course Constantine has I envious here way with words that is sometimes just positively magical, and he's done it extremely well there. I'm a little frustrated with my friend Douglas from that debate, because the word that didn't come up from the journalist that should have come up, that needed to come up, that I'm dying for it to have come up, is due diligence. It's not about expertise in that particular discussion they had. It is about whether or not due diligence has been done before reporting is being brought to the surface. And Douglas's point was, I've done due diligence before I wrote my book, and you haven't done due diligence for the amount you talk about this. And due diligence is a concept that hasn't fallen out of view. Like,
okay, I got to stop him there. This accusation that Dave Smith hasn't done due diligence. How do you know? Like, that Douglas Murray he's opined a lot. His opinions on the Islamization of Europe are spot on. I agree with him. I could do an entire episode on Islam and how it's... I don't agree with it and why I don't agree with it. But at any rate, this whole idea of due diligence, like, they're claiming because Dave Smith doesn't have the correct opinion, quote unquote, on this particular topic, means he hasn't done due diligence in looking at both. I think he's looked at both perspectives. Honestly, if you think about it, the Likud party in the Israeli government has really advocated for war for decades. They are, I think Bibi Netanyahu, I used to respect him, but then I kind of looked deeper into it and realized that he's just a blood-soaked demon, much like John McCain, where he just lusts for war, more and more conflict. Nobody wants peace. What, like, it seems like the John McCains of the world, the Joe Bidens of the world, the Volodymyr Zelenskys of the world, the Benjamin Netanyahus of the world, they don't want peace. They want constant war. Netanyahu wants, he got us into Iraq, partly, not fully, but he was partly, when he said that there are 3 countries pursuing nuclear weapons: Iraq, Iran, and Libya. And what happened? We overthrew Saddam in Iraq and got into that quagmire there that basically we kind of created a civil war environment for Iraq. And then Libya, they straight up murdered their president. Now, granted, Gaddafi was not a good guy, but they later found out there was no evidence that they were pursuing nuclear weapons or that they were going to have nuclear weapons and use them against us. But then, like, it's all based on these falsities that are pushed by the Israeli government. And this is not a critique of the Israeli people. I have a lot of friends who are Israelis. I grew up with a couple of Israelis. I think the Israeli people themselves are wonderful, glorious people. I've always wanted to go to Israel. I guess I can't really talk about Israel because, according to Douglas Murray, I've never been there, so I really shouldn't have an opinion on it. I've never been to Seattle, but I can tell you pretty firmly that I don't have any desire to go to Seattle because it's a crap hole. So I've never been to Mexico City, but I'm pretty sure it's an overpopulated mess. And yeah, so like there's a lot of things like you can't shut this down. And I've done due diligence. I've done reading. I'm sure Dave has too, because Dave's a smart guy, and I don't need to stand over here and defend Dave Smith, who excuse me, who I'm a big fan of. But it's like this whole idea of due diligence. So that's all I wanted to show on that. There's only like 30 seconds left. So to kind of put a bow on this, I guess, is that, the whole idea of this, I don't know what you would call it. The propaganda put out by this. Here's a perfect meme for it. corporations are behind all the politicians, and we're upset because they're doing that. But it's like the corporate media has really kind of screwed over Americans. In the fact that it's like, what are we supposed to do here? You know, like, there is a truth to be found underneath everything, and the corporate media is not the way to that. And they've proven it. They are dying. I mean, it's been talked about several times. I think Dave Smith brought it up. I've heard Clint Russell's brought it up. That, like, this old school idea of corporate media shilling their whole thing. And part of that corporate media, I really hate to say it, and this is going to, you know, ruffle some feathers, especially on the left, if they even hear this. But I'll say this. PBS and NPR are state media, and we should defund them. No more taxpayer funding to NPR and PBS. I get it. PBS does a lot of children's programming and a lot of educational stuff, but they're corporate media that are funded by the taxpayers and have a bias. And the media has shown that they can't be trusted anymore. And the whole idea behind it, like the long form podcast, Podcastistan. Guess what? Podcastistan seems to be getting a lot right. I could point you in the direction of a dozen different kinds of new media that you could check out that really does a better job than the corporate media of informing people. For instance, like I said earlier, I'm working my way through a lot of the Martyr Made podcast. You know, going to school full time and doing this on the side. This isn't my job, but, like, you know, I take time once in a while to try and listen to podcasts. There's a lot to catch up on. You know, part of the problem comes out like multiple times a week. Liberty Lockdown, multiple times a week. I catch a couple episodes here and there of the Matt Walsh Show. Tom Woods. I listen to a lot of Tom Woods because Tom Woods is phenomenal. They all get it better. You know, Joe Rogan just brings people on that he's interested in talking to. He's not trying to report on the news, or he's discussing things. That's why this whole, like, you know, podcast stuff, it's people with opinions, man. Come on. Like, that's all my show is me with an opinion. I have a libertarian perspective. I put things in context. I try to explain things as best I can, putting my perspective into things and showing, you know, kind of, I guess you could say, a rebut to the system, a rebut to the narrative, the agenda, the message, quote unquote. And, you know, I glean a lot more, I guess, tangible and relevant information from these things, from people like Mentis Wave on YouTube, like these people that do video essays and long form podcasts and hour-long shows. They are more valuable than the 24-hour news cycle bullcrap that we get on television from the corporate media. And this includes things like Fox News. I mean, I used to be a big Steven Crowder listener. I was a subscriber for a number of years. I agree with some of what he says. I disagree with some of what he says. But hey, you know, you're not going to agree with people 100% on everything. I mean, so that is kind of, you know, you got to take it with a grain of salt. But, like, there's a lot of good stuff out there. There's good conversations to be had. And this whole idea of you can't talk on a subject unless you're a quote-unquote expert or you have a formal education about it is just plain wrong. And yeah, sorry, Constantine, but you got it wrong here. It's not gatekeeping from the other perspective. And James Lindsay gets it wrong. It's not this whole it's outside the established narrative, so we therefore it's right. And this whole, woke right idea, I think, is kind of absurd. And we need to just stop looking to all these different, what have you, these stupid ideas, these fallacious arguments that say, if you're not an expert on topic X, Y, or Z, you can't have an opinion. Yes, you can. I mean, the fact that the corporate media has repeatedly failed to have any semblance of, journalistic integrity or honesty or even objective. I mean, like, none of it is objective anymore. It's so biased. It's why the White House press room has changed so much in the last few months as Trump's been in office. Why? Because everybody's like, we're sick of you corporate journalists coming in here and telling us how to think, and somehow you're correct and everybody else is wrong. No, they had Tim Pool in the White House press room the other day asking questions that the MSNBC and Fox News people will never ask. And these so-called podcastistanians or podcast whatever, but like that is the future. I'm not really a big fan of Tim Pool. I don't really listen to Tim Pool, but I mean, he makes good points once in a while. So this idea that if you're not a quote-unquote expert on a subject, you really can't have an informed opinion is frankly, it's absurd. Like, how do you not know? Like, you don't know what somebody else knows. Like the Daryl Coopers in the world that have read books, the Scott Hortons of the world, who literally, that's what they do. They delve into these topics. I mean, I've learned more about the Ukrainian conflict from Scott Horton and Dave Smith than I ever would from any news media, any whatsoever. And that is troubling. That the people who used to be the champions of informing the public are now the villains. And that is why corporate media is dying, because they have abandoned their responsibility to figure out and report on objective truth. And frankly, that's why the people like Douglas Murray, James Lindsay, Konstantin Kisin, Sam Harris, all of these people who consistently get it wrong. I mean, Dave said it a few weeks ago, or I think, last week. Dave said that, like, put my track record up against Douglas Murray's track record. Douglas Murray has been wrong on a lot of stuff, and Dave's been right on almost everything. I mean, really, since 2020, like, these people have gotten things wrong so much, and the Joe Rogans and the Dave Smiths of the world and the Clint Russells have got it right. They consistently get it right. And the fact that they keep getting it right, it's like, hey, maybe this shouldn't happen. Hey, like, just everything. It's insane how people keep getting it wrong. And people still give them legitimacy when they consistently get it wrong. Pfizer sponsors almost every corporate media conglomerate out there. It's insane. Of course they're going to tell you that the vaccine is completely safe. A vaccine where the maker of the vaccine needs 100% complete immunity from any liability whatsoever. Are you serious? Like, that is what you're hedging your bets on? And so the corporate media keeps getting it wrong, and they're failing, and this is why. And they deserve every second of it. They really do. They deserve every second of it. And I hope that the good, logical, moral people when we finally get to put the corporate media 6 feet in the ground and we start throwing the dirt on top of them, that everybody gets to take a collective piss on their grave, because the corporate media deserves every second of its downfall. So that's what I've got for y'all today. This one ran a little longer than usual, but hey, if you're still here, awesome. Like, subscribe, follow. This is just my part-time thing I do for fun. But I appreciate it. I'm trying to build this channel up. So I'm here, YouTube, Rumble, and now Spotify. I put that out recently that I just transferred my entire library to Spotify to expand. So now there's 3 places you can enjoy, and I welcome any comments. I welcome any discussion, as long as it's in good faith and not this appeal to authority fallacy bullcrap that people like Douglas Murray like to engage in. So I appreciate you listening, and I will see you guys on the next one. Thanks.